Doobity-doobity-doo. Doobity-doobity-doom. Ba-doom. Ba-doom. Boom. Bam, 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 bam. Bam, bam. Doobie-doop. Shooby-doop. Bam, 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 bam. Bam, 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 bam. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. Ba-dum, boom, boom. Ba-da-dum, boom, boom. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. Biddy-dee-biddy-doo-biddy, bam, bam. Biddy-dee-biddy-boo-biddy, boom, boom. Biddy-dee-biddy-boo-biddy, bam, biddy-biddy-biddy-biddy, boom, boom, boom. Ba-da-dum, boom, boom. Ba-da-dum, boom, boom. Da-dum, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Bam, 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 bam. Biddy-dee-biddy-doo-biddy-ding-biddy-ding.
Sound test.
Sound test. 1, 2, 3. It's connected. It's good. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Yesenia Guadalupe, and this is Decolonizing Is. So, welcome back. It is a beautiful day here in Miami, Florida. Very cool, very nice. I'm feeling it. And our topic for the day is boundaries and consent. So, we talked a little bit about this last week with the Thanksgiving episode, and I wanted to expand on that a little bit more. This time of year is generally one of being together with people, one of celebration, being convivial in general, right? And this brings a lot of like positive vibes, but it can also be a dangerous time, in particular for women and children, because violence, domestic violence, sexual violence is perpetrated by somebody that we know. And during these times, people are generally with their family members, or maybe are put into situations with people who may have harmed them in the past. So I wanted to talk about boundaries and consent a little bit today. So how does this tie into work of decolonization, right? Well, we live in a settler colonial state, and colonialism disregards boundaries, disregards human life. It's a general lack of respect for other human beings, their culture, their customs, their territory, their land. So this whole culture that kind of exists now, where boundaries are non-existent, is something that comes directly from colonialism and imperialism. It's this idea that people, right, and particularly white men, are entitled to land, are entitled to goods, are entitled to people's bodies, people's labor. And so this really kind of permeates the culture, right? And the thing about boundaries and consent is that it is rooted in our humanity. Our humanness gives us the right to autonomy. We have the right to decide for ourselves, right? How we live our lives, what is best for us. And systems of oppression really warp that and distort that reality. And so we find ourselves kind of perpetuating this idea that boundaries are non-existent. We have the right to do something just because we want to, or the right to have things just because we feel entitled to them. And that is rooted in colonialism. It is rooted in colonial violence. One of the biggest ways that colonial violence was perpetrated against natives was in the sexual abuse and violence against women, violence against children and elders. And it was also a kind of an alarm, right, for anybody who was going to be against the dehumanization practices of colonialism. So native groups were generally matrilineal. And we've talked about this a few episodes back in episode 3 about the 4 R's, right? Which are relationship, responsibility, reciprocity, and redistribution. And in a society that's matrilineal, there's a greater respect for the human being and for the autonomy of the individual. Each person is regarded as fully human. Each person is regarded as important. And so when the colonizers came to this land, that idea that all folks are entitled to their full humanity and are fully human was dangerous, because European culture, still to this day, is patriarchal. And so exposing European women to a society or a culture where the sexes are equal and regarded as equally important was very, very dangerous to the status quo. And so the way that this was combated was that natives were terrorized. That way, European women wouldn't dare to kind of step out of line. Colonialism really cemented patriarchy and patriarchal violence, and this has permeated all systems that we live under right now. There's this huge imbalance of power. The dynamic is completely out of whack, right? It's fucked up. And that's by design, because if we live with the assumption that we are responsible for each other, that our relationships to each other are important, that we need to be reciprocal in our relationships, that we need to redistribute power and resources, then there is no imbalance, right? So the system really holds up this imbalance of power. And because we live in a settler colonial state, and because we live under patriarchal violence, it's very, very difficult for a woman or somebody who is not in a position of power to say no. And so I really want to talk about how we can set boundaries for ourselves, how important it is to set boundaries for ourselves, and how important it is to enforce those things. So as a human being, I need to know what my body feels like at a resting state. I need to know who I am. And this is work that we all have to do individually. So somatics is one way that we can do that. Somatics is a form of meditation where we are very aware of our bodies and our systems. And yes and no is a feeling inside your body. And there is a full-bodied yes, right? Where when you're super excited to do something and you know that you are down 100%, your body tells you, you feel it. It's yes. And the same goes for a no. When there's resistance and tension and anxiety in my body, if I'm attuned to that, I can feel it. And a no is a no. And so we need to know what our yeses feel like, and we need to know what our nos feel like. And once we do that, once we know that, then we can start to exercise our power and our voice. When speaking of boundaries, words are important, right? Words are important. And we all have a responsibility to each other to respect each other's words. And this topic came up because I watched a video that a friend of mine, Leuryck Valentin on Instagram, recorded about consent, and a show that she was watching, and an example of consent that really moved her because it was so healthy, right? Which is something that we rarely ever see. We are conditioned socially to not take yeses and nos as firm. We're kind of conditioned to convince each other to do things, or to even coerce other people to do things. And this is something that we all need to stop doing. When we hear yes, right, then take that at face value. And when we hear no, we need to also respect that boundary. One great way to frame consent is through the act of tickling. When you're being tickled, you may be laughing, you may be having fun, you may be enjoying it, right? And so while you're in this environment of tickling and enjoying it and having fun, then it's great. The moment that somebody says stop, or the moment that somebody says no, even if their body is responding differently, we need to stop. Sometimes when we see that somebody's body is doing something that's incongruous to what they're saying, we think that they don't really mean the no. But the no should be a harsh boundary. It should be a stop. It should be a no. Our bodies react involuntarily to certain things. So a child who's being tickled, for example, may be laughing may be smiling. You may think that they're having fun, but if they're saying stop or no, there may be something that inside them is being triggered. There may be a feeling of being scared, or maybe they just don't want to be tickled anymore, right? So when we hear those words, no or stop, they need to mean something, and we have to make it mean something. So this dynamic of child and parent, right, with tickling is a great one because there is an imbalance there. There's an imbalance of power. The adult generally is bigger, and so in a situation where there is an imbalance of power and the power dynamic is skewed, it is the responsibility of the adult or the person in power to respect the no, to respect consent, and to level the playing field. Just because we are bigger or stronger or more powerful than another person doesn't mean that the other person loses their autonomy. It means that we, as the person in power, have the responsibility to listen, to level the playing field, and to make that situation safe. Colonialism teaches us that our no's or our boundaries are not to be respected. And it teaches us that because we are subjugated or because we are marginalized, that our boundaries don't mean anything. And that's not true. They do mean something, and we have to make it mean something by the way that we interact with each other, by the way that we interact with the planet, by the way that we interact with everything around us. We have a responsibility to each other to respect each other and to bring back this humanity that has been stripped from us and that has been normalized by systems that tell us that imbalances of power and these oppressive power dynamics are normal. They may be normal because the world is structured that way, because they want us to believe it's normal, but that is not who we are at our core. At our core, we are human beings who deserve respect and love and who have autonomy over our bodies and what we decide that we want or do not want. How am I doing on time?
You got 3 minutes and 48 seconds.
We have the responsibility to listen, to level the playing field whenever possible, and to make spaces that are safe for us to say yes or no. The way that that starts is with us, with our interactions with other people, and really listening and trying our best to be better for each other. Let's embody love by respecting boundaries, by respecting our personal boundaries, by having them and enforcing them, and each other's boundaries by listening when other people speak and respecting what they say. So thank you for joining us today and for watching this episode of Decolonizing Is. We appreciate you being here. If you have any comments, please leave them in the box below, in the description box. There's going to be links so you can further dive into the resources that I used to put this episode together. If you would like to support My XX Fly and our efforts here, then please consider joining us at Patreon. You can become a patron for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/myxxfly. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week.